Welcome and willkommen aus Seligenstadt am Main. My name is Michael Nies and I'm excited to show you around my home place. I was born here 60 years ago and I'm coming back every year to visit family and enjoy the history and the surroundings and just the lifestyle here in this ancient town. So I'll show you around today. If you have any questions, put it in the comments field. I will try to pick it up. Might have to get my glasses out to can read it. But yeah, let's have a look through Seligenstadt. Just a quick overrun. So what we do, we start here in the marketplace, then we move through the Altstadt, the old part of Seligenstadt, into the Abbey Gardens, and finishing up on the River Main and at the Basilica, which is a huge building right on the river. And plus, because my background comes from a baking family, a bakery, so we're finishing up at a beautiful place called Fachwerk Haeuser. They have the most amazing cakes. So let's get the tour started and let's walk through the marketplace. So this is the marketplace. This is the Rathaus. That's the town hall straight in front of us. So Seligenstadt, as I mentioned before, it's very old. Imagine this. This was basically forest area, and in 100 AD, the Romans established their first camp here, an army camp with about 500 soldiers. So these 500 soldiers were here to protect the Limes, which was a fortification against the Alemans, the enemies of the Romans in those days. So it goes back really way back. The Romans stayed for 160 years, but it's quite fascinating to imagine that they would have stayed right at this spot here. At the marketplace was their first camp for 160 years. So just imagine that. A little bit of change, and that's the reason we're going through the Altstadt soon. But here's an interesting thing. It's a fountain, obviously, but we got some dates here, and we will talk a little bit more about those dates while we're going through. So we have 815, 828, 836, etc., etc. So there are really important dates in the history of Seligenstadt. So let's make our way over to the Einheit House. Yeah, Einheit House. Oh, here again, look at that. Just got pointed out. There is the history with all the numbers. So die Schenkung 815. I think you can't read it, but it's pretty well documented here what's happened in all those years. So let's head over back to the Einheit House, which is right opposite here. It's one of the most amazing buildings in Seligenstadt. It's quite a busy day here today. Lots of people are out. And before we go over there, just a little look over that little die Bühne. Basically, in a couple of days, on the 15th, the 17th of July, there's the big Geleitsmarkt. You can see the flags up here as well. It's a gathering, a historic gathering, which goes right back to the 1600s. But one step at a time, let's go over to the Einheit House and have a quick look at that beautiful building. It's quite busy here, so I have to watch out where I'm going. But let's cross the road. Well, I didn't plan those guys, the trucks, etc. So yeah, just a quick look up here. Not sure if you can see it, but up there you can see a head watching out. That's supposed to be Einheit. And oops. It's a longer story, but I keep it short. Basically, in 815, the area around Seligenstadt was donated, was gifted by Ludwig des Frommen to Einheit. Einheit was an advisor to Kaiser Karl, the father of Ludwig den Frommen, And yeah, and that was the start basically for the local abbey and the church. And there's a story attached to it, because old Einhard was married to the daughter of King Karl. And yeah, it's while on a forest trip, while on the hunting trip, he came across this house and he said, "Selig sei die Stadt genannt, wo ich meine Tochter immer wieder fand." So it's, yeah, again, I could go into all sorts of little details, but it's a fascinating story. In respect of the name, the Romans called Seligenstadt, or the place here, fortification, Selgum, which is actually the word for a hub, for a mountain hub, for a little, risen kind of a hill. And that's exactly what we have in Seligenstadt. When we're going down to the River Main, it's actually a little bit lower, so you can imagine why the Romans would have used this place as their first fortification, because it's slightly higher. They have all the advantages of that, but also they have the water. There's a creek running through Seligenstadt, which we'll visit soon. Today we have a bit of a Flohmarkt, it's called, sort of a flea market with lots of things to see and to buy, and there's all sorts of market happening during the week, from fruit market, they have fresh foods, preserved fruits, but today is the flea market, so it's very important, I feel, for these villages, for Seligenstadt especially, to have people coming into the place. And as you can see, it's very busy already. It's morning, about 11 o'clock here in Germany. It's only about, Seligenstadt's only about 35 kilometers away from Frankfurt Airport, and it's one of these villages you really can access very easily when you land in Frankfurt, and you get into Seligenstadt for a couple of nights. And it's one of these places. It's maybe not as famous as Heidelberg or Neuschwanstein, but it is true Germany. You see here the Alte Schmiede. This is now a very flash restaurant. I had dinner last year there, very, very good food. But when I think back in my childhood, there was actually a blacksmith. Mr. Karl Militzer was running this blacksmith place, and I still vividly remember the smell and the dark place inside as a kid. I remember the horses being tied up here and the horseshoe was placed on it. It brings me right back to my childhood. It's a beautiful building, but we will see more of those when we actually now heading into the Altstadt. So let's do it. Let's go into the Altstadt of Seligenstadt. Here's one of these little roads heading right into it, but we're using this one here. We're going into the Altstadt, where we have lots of Fachwerk Haeuser, we call it. So these houses are basically traditionally built old living houses, homes, most of them dating back 1600s or even older than that, 1400s. But the key issue here is that they have been restored beautifully. So in my childhood, I was running around here as a kid in the 70s, early 70s, and this was a little bit in state of repair, the whole place. So, but later on, the 70s and 80s especially, they started to the town, the city council, and with the support of the government, of the Hessen government, supported to get those houses beautifully restored. I mean, as you can imagine, it's a huge task. It's a huge task, and very expensive. So, and especially because they are in the old city, they have special requirements by law. So but look at that. Here we have a lawyer's office, but most of them are actually living, houses where people actually live. So let's have a look what it looks like. Oh, here we are. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Beautiful side with the old flags flying because of the Glide Fest. I'll talk about it very soon, but let's have a look through here and go into one of these little alleyways. So here. So this one, the reason I want to go down here is just to show you what a house would have looked like when I was a kid. What kind of state the houses were here. So we have, again, on the left hand side we have beautifully restored houses, but here we have one which is basically in the state of repair. So we have here the old wood structure, and we have here the mud, the straw, and all sorts of material put together for installation. In fact, I used to live in an old a house like that, and the installation is beautifully. It's really cool in the summertime and very, very cozy in the winter time. Here again, it's a restored building, and the rooms are maybe a little bit smaller, but apart from that, there's everything else you need in a modern house with heating, internet, all the rest. Installation, very, very important here. Okay, so let's head towards the Abbey now. But while we're doing this, I have a little bit more time to tell you about Seligenstadt. So it was was gifted. The area was gifted in 815 from Ludwig den Frommen to Einhard, and Einhard started building the local abbey in about 825, 828, as well as the church. So in those days, until 815, the place was called Obermühlheim. But from 1828, 830 onwards, it's basically the name was replaced to Seligenstadt. Seligenstadt, Selig means place, so it's basically the blessed town or the blessed city, Seligenstadt. Yeah, look at that. So again, the flags. It's the upcoming Geleidsmarkt. Geleit is a trade road which happened in the 1600 after the 30-year-old war. You can imagine there was lots of trade going on between the southern parts of Germany and Austria as well towards Frankfurt. So because of the warfare and the insecurity happened in those days, the Kaufleute, the traders, they would bind together into caravans to hit from Nürnberg, Würzburg, Aschaffenburg to Frankfurt. And the last stop before Frankfurt would be Seligenstadt am Main. So that is celebrated with a big festival this weekend for 3 days. It's a huge event which happens only every 4 years actually. So, and what's happening also is all these little places here, like this one on the left hand side, these beautiful old buildings and little courtyards here. This store will be open on the weekend, on Saturday, and probably do another live streaming tour then to show you inside those beautiful restored houses and into the courtyards. They're surrounded with, often these places there would have been farms, so farmers would have lived in those houses. The city of Seligenstadt was fortified. There were basically a huge wall around the city to protect it from warfare and all sorts of troublemakers. So everything, security was a big thing in those days. In the background we already see the towers of the Basilica. We'll get there at the kind of end of our tour and talk a little bit about that. But here again, yet another wonderful sample of how those old houses are restored. Basically they take everything out. They just leave the structure and the beams, and then they rebuild everything again. So it's a huge task, but it's so worthwhile because it will last for a long time. And as I mentioned before, it's by law, those houses, they can't be pulled down. So that's a very, very important good thing to have. Overall, if you come to Germany and those places, we just visited others, Alps, Büdingen, which is about an hour's drive from here. It's so much worthwhile to going into these smaller places in Germany, not just visiting like Heidelberg and Neuschwanstein. You find real treasures down here. Because it's real, there are not many tourists around, and it's just mind-blowing what has happened with these old towns and cities over the last 1,000 or even 2,000 years, like in Seligenstadt. Okay, let's head over to the Abbey. So we're walking through a very popular square, which called the Friedhofplatz. Look at that, the Basilica. We'll get there in about 20 minutes, so let's just shoot through. So back again. So when I was born in 1964, the place was quite sleepy, Seligenstadt. This has changed, especially the last 30 years after the restoration process in Seligenstadt with the old town. Lots of tourists are now coming, especially on the weekends. So if you can avoid the weekends, that's great. So the square here, the Friedhofplatz, is really famous for excellent food. There's a couple of restaurants, or 3 actually, and I believe they're all, at least 2 of them, are owned by the same people, but they really run an excellent job. So beautiful place to have lunch, have dinner, and to enjoy. Now let's head into the Abbey. So the Abbey was established by Einhard in 825. Think about that, 825. It's about 1200 years ago. So you have to imagine the Abbey was like a city in the city. It's a little bit like the Vatican, that there were monks. There's a couple of hundred monks were here, and they're pretty self-sufficient. They had their own their animals. They had a huge garden. We're going in there soon, and they had wine production. They had estates across the river, which I show you later on in the tour. But when I was a kid, again, I was walking through here. And it was just a little bit in a state of repair again, but the Abbey basically functioned until 1803, and then it was basically stopped. There were about 20 monks left at the end. Most of them, they were paid out a kind of retirement. The others, 3 of them actually died here. They were given the opportunity to stay until the end of their days, so they did. But it had a lot of challenges along the way. They had, especially in the 1600s, we had a big war here, the 30-year-old war in the 1600s, between 1618 and 1648, which really devastated Seligenstadt as well as the Abbey here. But they rebuilt it, and I'll just show you a little bit more about that when we go towards the gardens. But let's have a quick look at the bakery, which today's baking day. So because my background is a baker, so let's move on quickly because there's some other people coming from behind. They're just putting bread in there. Let's have a look at the bakery. The bakery used to be part of the Abbey. So again, that's all historic. Here's actually also a mill. where they used to mill with the wheat, the flour. So let's have a quick look into the bakery. Hello. Hello. Look at that. Look at that. Beautiful bread. Beautiful German bread. So here's the baker at work. He just cleaned out the oven. When I was here before, he was hi. Hello. When I was here before, he actually had the fire going, but it goes quite rapidly now. So yeah, this is the old bakery from the Abbey, which was used, which is used still every Thursday, and they're producing this beautiful bread. Do you have another session today? Another baking? Yes. Yes, right. Oh, they have another one in 10 minutes, so we might pop back and let them do their job. But have a quick look at those beautiful breads. Beautiful. Sind das alles die gleiche Brote, oder?
Alles die gleiche Brote.
Ist das Bauernbrot, oder?
Das ist ein Sauerteigbrot, 70% trocken, 30% Dinkel.
Aha.
Und dann ist Anis, Koriander, Fenchel.
Right. So I just talked to the baker. Basically, it's sourdough bread, and we have anise, coriander, fennel. So it's beautifully. They're in Germany here that they're using. I'll just pass this along here. Kümmel up. Yeah, they're using spices to really put flavor into the bread. I do that myself, to be honest. I'll have a bit of sourdough in New Zealand, and I actually use kümmel, cereal. So okay, let's get out here again, because there's lots of people in here. But it's really worthwhile to time it well. Come in through on a Thursday. Here again, you know, let's have a quick look here in the old water mill. So there used to be a little creek running through Seligenstadt, as mentioned before, and they used the water basically to do their flour. It's closed today, but I'm sure it will be open for the Geleitzmarkt, because on Saturday all the different Zünfte, all the different professions will actually showcase their trade. There will be fishermen, there will be baker, there will be carpenters. All sorts of trades will showcase their tradition, and that's so important and so beautiful to experience. So if you can, come again in 4 years to the next Geleitzmarkt. It's usually in July, and it's really a huge event here in Seligenstadt. Okay, let's carry on in the Abbey. Tell another few stories about this. There's a lot of, you see the garden here, there's a lot of work happening. It's all supported by the government. It's owned by the government. After 1803, the monastery, the buildings were used basically for government bureaucrats to run things. And yeah, there was nothing much happening after the Second World War. So as I mentioned before, it was in kind of a state of repair. But let's have a closer look at some of these little places, little windows, little doors. Unfortunately, we can't go in there, but right below us here, right below this little window here, there's actually a huge kitchen. I've been in there on the tour. This is all now a museum. You can actually go in there. So if you come to Seligenstadt, I highly recommend to do a trip, because you see the original kitchen. But this is here a place where they used to provide some basic food to the poor in hardship times, especially in those days of the wars. And yeah, there was a lot of change happening over the years. We got also beautifully attached to the kitchen, a beautiful dining area with the monks. And a friend of mine, they've done a singing for his birthday the other day, and he said, look, the acoustics are just phenomenal. You just, you know, it sends a shiver down your spine. It's like, you know, being in those days, you know, hundreds of years ago. So I mentioned before that a lot of the buildings that were raided, they were not burned down like it was quite common, but the people of Seligenstadt did a deal with the Swedish people, Swedish army, so to say. They came right down to Seligenstadt. They did a deal with them to not burn Seligenstadt down. But what they did, they raided the place, including the abbey. So that was around about the mid 1600s, 1658, around about that time. But that's when they started rebuilding it, like here we see up there on this entrance door, 86. So let's go through that now, going into the Abbey Garden. So there's lots of information about the interior. Again, you can go on a tour, which I highly recommend. Look at that, you know, there's some beautiful pictures of how lush those rooms, some of the rooms are. Here's all about the history, about the monks, what's happened. I mean, we could spend hours here to actually go through all this. The monks were the Benedict monks. So here we are. That's Einhard on Emma, his wife. So that's a painting. So he was the founder of the abbey and also the man who started building the Einhard Basilica. Okay, let's go into the Abbey Gardens. As I mentioned before, there was the monks were very self-sufficient. They had their own animals, but they also had their own gardens. And here the gardens, they are massive. They had about 10,000 square meter gardens around the abbey. And here we're going through the herb garden. So there's all sorts of herbs, and they're still actually looked after. They're still here carefully looked after by the staff, by the gardeners, which are constantly at work here. That's obviously a beautiful time of the year when everything is lush. You know, you got salbei, you got all sorts of herbs, and you know they're partly still used for treatments for people which know what they're doing. So look at that, we've got the Basilica here right in front of us, at least one of the towers, the Octagon Tower. But we've got a lovely little cafe place here, which is open most days during the week, and that's very, very popular for tourists and locals to relax and enjoy that beautiful environment. Let's just have a wipe through here the gardens from that view, and I just stop talking and you just enjoy that kind of surrounding. Right, back. So we got these lovely little angels popped up here, just protecting all the plants, all the trees. Let's head down into the garden, because they are not just looking pretty, but they also actually produce food. So we have all sorts of onions, we have salads sometimes, just depends a little bit. We got here pears, we got apples, all sorts of fruit and vegetables, and they're actually sold once they arrive for harvest. They will be sold to the local people, and they can buy them. We've got a fig tree here, so it's all there. It's the garden fell into a state of repair, obviously, after the monks left. So the garden as we see it now has been re-established over the last 20-30 years to make it look as pretty as possible. While we're here having this beautiful sight with the Seligenstadt Basilica in front of us, I might talk a little bit more about the Basilica as such. So the Basilica was started building in about 830, 828, 830, and it did not look like what we see in these days. It was much smaller. They built it just a main body. And in 1050 they added 2 towers, like not the ones we see here in the background, but actually smaller ones. They were rebuilt over time. They basically did until 1920s. Actually, they continuously added on to the Basilica building, like the octagon tower here was built in the 1300s. So there was a constant, you can say over a period of 1,000 years almost, a constant adding on and making the place larger. So, but what's happened in 1925, the church was lifted up to the state of the Basilica by Pope Pius XI. So that was an important moment, because this basilica, the Seligenstadt Basilica, is the largest basilica north of the European Alps. Okay, let's head towards the River Main now, which is right in front of us, and let's talk a little bit more about the location, where we are, why Seligenstadt was and is still such an important place, and therefore a really interesting place for visitors to Germany. Like just in the background, let's have a quick look. There's also beehives. So they're producing the local beekeeper club, der Bienenzuchtverein. They put up here beehives, traditional ones, and yeah, they're actually only traditional ones. I don't want to go too close, but you get the idea when you look there. The old bees doing their work. It's just such a beautiful sight, because they are so important for nature and for us all, really. I love bees. My father also used to be a beekeeper, so I had lots of honey in my younger days, which is good. Hey, while I'm here, this is called Spalierobst. That was very traditional in those days, and the old monks, they would have actually grown the trees right on the wall, and they would actually attach the trees and make them really productive. So this one doesn't look that good. There's another one here, looks much better. Pears, so it could be any kind of fruits, pears, apples, even plums, all sorts of that. That's called Spalierobst. It's a very effective and efficient way to grow lots of fruit in a limited space. Okay, let's move towards the River Main. Look at that, the old ferry just coming through. So in the background you see the Hans-Memling-Schule. That used to be the local primary school. Now it's basically a center for the city. This place in front of us, it's called the Schulbubenhof. It's the Schulbubenhof. How do I translate that? It's basically the playground for the school kids, for the Buben, the boys, Schulbubenhof. And they also put up, here we are, put up a large Bimmelbank. What do they call them? Bumblebank, which is a usual park bench, but it's actually quite high. So that's quite a cool little principle. And they're donated, by the way, by Annette and Günther Bernhard. So let's head towards the river and enjoy that beautiful sight. So As I mentioned before, Seligenstadt is located about 35 kilometers from Frankfurt, about 25 kilometers from Aschaffenburg, but probably Frankfurt is the place you can identify. It's right in the middle of Germany. The River Main is one of the major rivers in Germany. So when I was a kid, and it's still happening too, but especially until about 40-50 years ago, there was a lot of freight traffic up and down in barges, the river, to going all the way to Rotterdam, Amsterdam, and even now what's very popular are these cruises to actually go on a river cruise. And those river cruises through Europe, they basically start in Budapest, going through the Rhine-Main-Donau Canal, and they're finishing up in Rotterdam, Amsterdam, up north. And this Seligenstadt's part of that. So here is a Anlegesteg. It's basically a pier. It doesn't look that big, but it's very, very popular that people that ships stay here overnight. So people have the opportunity to explore Seligenstadt during the day, I should say, and overnight they carry on to the next destination. So here we have the Seligenstadt Fähre, which connects Seligenstadt with the other side of the River Main. So we got on the left-hand side, we have Hessen, the state of Hessen, and on the other side we have the state of Bavaria. So over there on the other side, when I was a kid, this was like America to me. It was so far away. We never made it over there. But I guess that those were the days. Everything was pretty local. You were based in Seligenstadt, and you didn't really venture out too much. 50 years ago, obviously things have changed. Look at the swans there. Look at the swans. They've been a feature for Seligenstadt, for this part of Seligenstadt, for so many years. I still remember them too when I was a kid. So let's move up towards the Altstadt again, and there's a couple of places I want to show you. One is the Lügenbank, but there's some other people there at the moment. Let's have a quick look at that sign here, which is quite interesting because it talks about Kulturradweg Kurmainz. So bicycling is in these days a really important part of tourism in Germany, as well as probably New Zealand as well, but especially Germany. They've built a lot of Fahrradwege, and people basically go from A to B and stay overnight in little inns and really have a wonderful time, especially going along the river. It's quite it's not hilly, so to say, so you either getting up towards the source or towards the ocean. So it's actually really easy bicycling, especially with e-biking in these days. It's phenomenal. It's an important part of the economy for the local tourism to have these people staying in the summer season, of course. Over there you see these people standing. This is called the Lügenbänkchen. I don't want to interrupt these folks. There's another guide just explaining it. But basically, I actually know the guide. His name is Rupert Post. He's another original Seligenstädter. He's doing his tour. He's very interested in history like myself. So this Lügenbänkchen is basically a seat where the old days the fisher people would come after the day's fishing and would tell porgies about how large the fish they were, which they caught during the day. So that's the reason it's called the Lügenbänkchen, and because you can tell lies there without getting in too much trouble. Let's have a look up here. Yeah, he was a old. I'll just swing around him. I'll just He's a tour guide now. He used to be in my singing club, and we used to sing together with his father as well. His father was a very important figure in Seligenstadt to initiate the restoration on the Altstadt, so very important guy. And that's what's happening when you come back to Seligenstadt once a year. You bump into people you haven't seen for 20 years or so. But here's another interesting side. Because we're on the river, there were flooding, of course, over time. So we're looking, from 1995 right back to 1342. So there were all sorts of floodings happening over time. You can imagine if you look back, that's when we talked about that Seligenstadt was built a little bit higher up from the river. We see this quite strongly now when we head back into the marketplace. There is so you can imagine how high this water would have got here with the high waters. So another really important point in Seligenstadt is ice cream. So ice cream is, Seligenstadt's famous for it. There are numerous places which have established themselves as one of the best ice cream places. One of them is here. On the weekends, honestly, at the moment there's nobody here. But on the weekend, it's just chock-a-block with people. You have queues of people queuing up. You can't get a seat here, but people love their ice cream, especially ice cream arrangements. It's a beautiful little building. Look at that. I mean, it's just a darling little thing. And again, if you come during the week, you actually be able to see the place in its best glory. Let's have a quick look into, it's called das Rote Brünnchen. As a kid, I was actually going through the Rote Brünnchen, and we would throw in coins for good luck. Let's have a look. Let's go to the Roten Brünnchen. You see, that's really right in the heart. Obviously, people would have used, there's just some photograph taking place. That's all right. Thank you very much. I'm just doing a live tour. So that's called the Rote Brünnchen. And when I was a kid, we were coming along and we're playing around. We're doing all sorts of naughty things with putting some wash powder in there and things like that. But it was also a place where you can get good luck. So we would actually throw in some coins. I don't think there are any more coins in these days, but I'll check it out. Look at this. This is a gorgeous little fountain. It's very old, and people used to do their washing here as well. It was an important source of fresh water. Okay, so let's head back. I might head back that direction. Thank you very much. Let's head back this direction. Just that you get the vibe, get the feeling of this beautiful place. I mean, honestly, every year I come back to Seligenstadt, I'm just amazed how gorgeous it is, and it's kind of a great energy to restore when you go to this old historic city of Seligenstadt. I want to finishing up really going back towards the Freihof and see a little bit more about the cathedral from the front part. That's how we see how we're going with time. So we still have a little bit of time. Let's go up. So you see the bicyclists coming through. The wall here obviously was made to protect against the water, the high waters. That would have happened, as we've seen before. That would have happened quite frequently in the old days without having dikes and having structures in the river to prevent that. But so when people come up here from the cruise ships, they walk up here, and what they get hit with really lovely little shops as well. It's well done. It's well done. You got beautifully. It's quality products, and people just love to hang around and even buy some stuff once in a while. So, but you know, it's well done. It's often local produced, so it's not imported from China. So look at that. I mean, it's just a feast for the eyes, and you know, we all. I mean, my wife, she loves going here through here. Even myself, I really enjoy that. You got some wine places in the evenings. We've got here local wine harvest on the other side of the river, but we also have apple wine, which is produced from apples. So that's a traditional wine in the area. We got here Seligenstadt Basilica. I told you a little bit about it before. Servus Hubert. Ah, yeah, I'm sorry. I just called him his father's name, so I didn't want to do that. So yeah. So here we have the two Gebeine. They have the remains of two of the Hofolies of Marcellinus and Petrus. They were transferred from Rome, so to say, to the Seligenstadt Basilica in the very early days. So the Seligenstadt people are quite proud of having those remains in their church. So let's head back towards the Freihoffplatz and leave Rudolf behind. Not Hubert. Hubert was his father. So you see, there's quite a bit of tour guiding happening here. There's also another view into the Abbey from here. When I was a kid, these were really cool sights because there were birds behind these windows here. There were birds like pheasants and all sorts of chicken and so on. They were running around. And this is also part of the museum. So if you ever come here, you would actually go in there to the Abbey Museum. Okay, let's move on. Here is another famous ice cream shop. It's called the Ice Kaiser. Ice Kaiser was the place when I was a kid. People would actually come from all over the Frankfurt area to come here. You would say that you're from Seligenstadt, people would say, oh, Ice Kaiser. That's what it was in those days. So yeah, it's still here. Must be now about 50 years old or so. But let's move and go towards the marketplace again. Here's one of the restaurants, the Klosterstube. It's been around for a long time. When I was a kid, the Klosterstube existed, probably a different owner now. But you see, I mean, the care and attention, what they've done here is just gorgeous. It's really, really popular still, and it's a lovely place to relax and have holidays. So I highly recommend coming, obviously, everybody to Germany coming to Seligenstadt am Main to check it out. So we're heading now back. We kind of at the end of our tour, but we're heading back to a very special place, very dear to my heart. It's called the Konditorei Bäckerei Haas. Yeah, as I said before, my background, my family's background is the bakery. When I grew up here, there were 14 bakers for 14,000 people living in Seligenstadt. That has changed, obviously. There's, I think the smaller ones, there's probably only 3 or 4 left. Most of them have given up because people now buy bread in supermarkets. The other one is Metzgerei Bäcker, very old, very long established, gone through generations. Metzgerei Bäcker, I knew, they were business friends of my parents. Yeah, it's gone through several generations, and they're probably, they had to extend their services. They're doing lots of lunches here, as you can see. people coming in, the old cheeseburger, the old currywurst and all sorts of things. But yeah, this place is too, that was Munch. As a kid I was here and I was buying more paper and pens here. I still remember those steps walking up there and getting all the things I needed for the school. So now again it's a souvenir shop, but that's the way it is. That's the way the cookie crumbles. So let's head back to the square, the market square, the Marktplatz of Seligenstadt am Main. And I can't resist showing you those beautiful cakes. Before I show you that at the end, I'll just swing around and say bye-bye to you. It's been a pleasure. Just a minute, I'll just swing around. Oops. Well, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure showing you around my hometown. It's you know, as you probably get, I'm quite proud of the place I was born. Seligenstadt am Main. It is a treasure. So thank you very much for joining in. Let's go into Konditorei Bäckerei Haas and let's have a look at the cakes. Bye. Right, let's move in. I checked with them before, so they're happy for us to actually go in there and have a look at the cakes. So let's have a look at the cakes. Right, let's have a look at those cakes. This is Germany for you, with the most amazing cakes, torts and breads. Let's have a look at these phenomenal torts first. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that incredible? There's Bienenstich. I think there must be chocolate ghetto in the background. It's all sorts of things. So I'm sure when you come to Germany, come to Seligenstadt, you will come to Café Haas and you will have a look at these beautiful products Germany is so famous for. Thank you very much again for joining. All the best. Bye.